Toad Learns the Worst. Chapter 10. Rat grabbed Toad and hauled him out of the river. "Oh, Ratty," Toad cried, "I've been through so much since I saw you last. I got through it all with courage and intelligence. Just wait until you hear." "Toad," said Rat, "you go upstairs right now and take off that old cotton rag that looks as if it once belonged to some washerwoman, and wash yourself and put on some of my clothes. Now stop swaggering and arguing and go." When Toad had changed, he joined Rat for lunch. While they ate, Toad told Rat all his adventures, making himself sound like a hero and making all the worst parts sound fun and exciting. When he was finally finished, Rat was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Now, Toady, I don't want to make you feel bad, but seriously, don't you see what an idiot you've been making of yourself? You're telling me you have been handcuffed, imprisoned, starved, chased, terrified out of your life, insulted, and thrown into the water. Where's the fun in that? And all because you had to go steal a motor car? You know you've never had anything but trouble from motor cars from the moment you first saw one. It's one thing to drive them, fine, but why do you have to steal them?" When Rat had finished, Toad sighed and said, "You're right, Ratty. How smart you always are. Yes, I've been an idiot. I can see that. But now I'm going to be a good Toad. We'll have a quiet chat, and then I'm going to walk down to Toad Hall and settle back in. I've had enough of adventures. I just want to live a quiet life at home." "Walk down to Toad Hall!" cried Rat. "What are you talking about? Are you telling me you haven't heard?" "Heard what?" said Toad, turning pale. "Are you telling me," shouted Rat, "that you haven't heard about the Stoats and Weasels?" "What? The Wildwooders?" cried Toad, trembling. "And how they've taken over Toad Hall?" continued Rat. Toad began to cry. "When you were away," Rat said, trying to be polite about Toad being in jail, "well, everyone was talking about it, not only along the river, but even in the wild wood. The wild wood animals said it served you right and that you would never come back again. Never, never." Toad just nodded. "But Mole and Badger," Rat went on, "they kept saying that you would come back again soon. They didn't know exactly how, but somehow." Toad began to sit up in his chair and smile a little. "So they moved their things to Toad Hall," Rat told him, "and planned to stay there and have it all ready for you when you came back. They didn't guess what was going to happen, but they were suspicious. Now I come to the worst part of my story. One dark night, when it was raining cats and dogs, a band of weasels, armed to the teeth, crept up to the front entrance of Toad Hall. At the same time, some ferrets got into the backyard and offices, and some stoats took over the greenhouse. Toad looked shocked. But there was more. Rat went on. Mole and Badger were sitting by the fire in the living room when those bloodthirsty villains broke down the doors and rushed in upon them from every side. Badger and Mole fought as hard as they could, but what was the use? They were taken by surprise, and what can two animals do against hundreds? The Stoats and Weasels and ferrets beat them up and threw them out into the cold and rain, and the Wildwooders have been living in Toad Hall ever since," finished Rat. "They lie in bed half the day and make a mess and eat your food and make bad jokes about you. And they're telling everybody that they've come to stay for good." "Oh, have they?" said Toad, getting up. "I'll see about that." He marched down the road, talking angrily to himself until he got near his front gate. But there was a ferret guarding the gate, and he would not let Toad pass. He went back and told Rat. "What did I tell you?" said Rat. "It's no good. They have guards everywhere. You'll just have to wait." But Toad was not ready to give up. He got out the boat and rowed up the river to Toad Hall. When he saw his old home, he slowed down to look around. Everything seemed quiet. The house looked the same as always, as if it were waiting for him to come back. Quietly he paddled closer. He was just passing under the bridge when, crash! A huge stone dropped from above, smashed through the bottom of the boat. The boat sank, and Toad splashed around in the deep water. Looking up, he saw two stoats leaning over the bridge, laughing at him. Toad swam to shore and went back to tell Rat what had happened. "Well, what did I tell you?" asked Rat. "And now look what you've done. Ruined my boat and that nice suit of clothes I lent you. Really, Toad." Toad knew he'd been bad. He apologized to Rat for losing his boat and spoiling his clothes, and he promised to listen to Rat and not do anything else until Rat told him to. "All right," said Rat. "Sit down and have some supper. Mole and Badger will be here soon, and we'll talk about what to do." "Oh, yes, Mole and Badger," said Toad. "I almost forgot about them. What happened to them?" "Nice of you to ask," said Rat. "While you were riding around the country in expensive motor cars, those two poor animals have been camping out, watching over your house, keeping an eye on the stoats and the weasels, and planning how to get your property back for you. You don't deserve to have such true and loyal friends, Toad. Someday, when it's too late, you'll be sorry you didn't appreciate them while you had them." "I'm an ungrateful Toad, I know," sobbed Toad. "Let me go out and find them. I'll go out into the cold, dark night and— Hold on! Didn't I just hear the clink of dishes on a tray? Supper's here. Come on, Ratty." Rat remembered that poor Toad had been eating prison food for a long time, so he followed him to the table. They had just finished their meal when there was a heavy knock at the door. When Rat opened it, in walked Mr. Badger. He looked as if he hadn't been home in a long time. His shoes were muddy, and his clothes were wrinkled. He came up to Toad, shook his paw, and said, "Welcome home, Toad." "Oh, what am I saying? Home, ha! This is a terrible homecoming, poor Toad." Then he sat down to eat. Soon there was another knock. This time it was Mole, who also looked very shabby. "Hooray! Here's old Toad," cried Mole, beaming. "We never dreamed you would turn up so soon. You must have escaped, you smart Toad." Rat grabbed Mole's elbow, but it was too late. Toad was already puffing up with pride. "Smart? Me? Oh, no," he said. "I'm not really smart. I just broke out of the strongest prison in England, that's all, and captured a train and escaped on it, that's all, and disguised myself and went around fooling everybody, that's all. Oh, no, I'm just silly old Toad. I'll tell you one or two of my little adventures, Mole, and you can judge for yourself." "Well, well," said Mole, "why don't you talk while I eat? I haven't had a bite since breakfast." "Tell us how things look at Toad Hall," Rat said quickly to Mole, "and what you think we should do now that Toad is back." "It's a bad situation," Mole said gloomily, "and I don't know what to do. Badger and I keep walking all around the house, and the weasels and stoats just laugh at us." "Well," said Rat, "I've been thinking about it, and I think Toad should—" "No!" cried Mole. "You're wrong. He should—" "I won't!" shouted Toad. "It's my house, and I'll decide." By this time they were all talking at once. Then Badger spoke up. "Be quiet, all of you." They all fell silent. "Toad," he said severely, "you bad little animal, aren't you ashamed of yourself? What do you think your father, my old friend, would have said if he knew what you've been up to?" Toad began to sob. "There, there," said Badger, more kindly. "Stop crying. I know you're going to try to be a better Toad from now on, but what Mole says is true. The stoats are on guard." "Then it's all over," sobbed Toad. "I'll never see my dear Toad Hall again." "Cheer up, Toady," said Badger. "I haven't said my last word yet. Now I'm going to tell you a secret." Toad sat up and dried his eyes. He loved secrets. "There is an underground passage," said Badger, "that leads from the river bank right up into the middle of Toad Hall." "Oh, come on, Badger," said Toady. "I know every inch of Toad Hall, inside and out. There's no such thing." "My young friend," said Badger, "your father was a friend of mine, and he told me things he wouldn't have dreamed of telling you. He discovered that passage, and he thought it might come in handy some day in case of trouble or danger, so he showed it to me. "Don't tell my son about it," he said. "He's a good boy, but he can't keep a secret. If he's ever in real trouble, you may tell him." Toad looked surprised. Then he smiled sheepishly. "Well, well," he said, "I guess Father was right. I do like to talk and tell secrets. Anyway, Badger, how will this passage of yours help us?" "There's going to be a big dinner party at Toad Hall tomorrow night," Badger told them. "It's the Chief Weasel's birthday, I believe, and all the weasels will be gathered together in the dining hall, eating and drinking and laughing and carrying on." "But the guards will be posted as usual," said Rat. "Exactly," said Badger. "That is my point. The weasels will trust in their guards, and that is where the passage comes in. It leads right up into the pantry, next to the dining hall." "Aha, that squeaky board in the pantry," said Toad. "Now I understand it." "We shall creep out quietly into the pantry," cried Mole. "With big sticks," shouted Rat. "And rush in upon them," said Badger. "And whack 'em, and send them on their way," cried Toad happily. "Well then," said Badger, "our plan is settled. It's getting late. We'll make the rest of our plans tomorrow morning." The next day Toad came down to breakfast late, just as Mole came back from a secret errand. "I've been having such fun," Mole told the others. "I've been teasing the stoats." "I hope you've been careful, Mole," said Rat. "Oh, yes," said Mole. "I got the idea when I found that old washerwoman dress Toad came home in yesterday, hanging out to dry. I put it on and went to Toad Hall. The guards were on the lookout, of course. 'Good morning, gentlemen,' I said. 'Want any washing done today?' They looked at me and said, 'Go away, washerwoman. We don't do any washing on duty.' 'Or any other time?' I asked. Ha, 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 wasn't I funny, Toad?" "Silly animal," said Toad. He was jealous, to tell the truth. He wished he'd thought of doing that. "The sergeant told me to run away," said Mole, and I said, "Run away? It won't be me running away pretty soon." "Oh, Mole, how could you?" said Rat. Badger put down his newspaper. "I could see them looking at one another," Mole went on, "and the sergeant said to them, 'Never mind her. She doesn't know what she's talking about.'" "Oh, don't I?" said I. "Well, let me tell you this. My daughter, she cleans for Mr. Badger, and she heard that 100 bloodthirsty badgers are going to attack Toad Hall this very night, from the fields. 6 boatloads of rats will come up the river and land in the garden, and a gang of toads will come through the orchard. You'd better get out of here while you have the chance." Then I pretended to run away, but I came back and spied on them. They were all so nervous. They were running around and giving orders to one another and acting all confused. And I heard them saying to one another, "That's just like the weasels. They'll be having a great time while we ferrets and stoats have to stay out here on guard and get attacked by badgers." "Oh, you idiot, Mole," cried Toad. "You've spoiled everything." "Mole," said Badger quietly, "I think you have more sense in your little finger than some other animals have in their whole fat bodies. You have done a great job. Good Mole, smart Mole." Now Toad was wild with jealousy, especially since he couldn't understand what Mole had done that was so smart. But before he could say anything, Badger said it was time for lunch. After they ate, Badger suggested a nap, since they were going to have a busy night, and he headed for his armchair. Rat was too nervous to sleep, so he paced around pretending to prepare for their surprise attack. Mole, maybe to make up with Toad, asked to hear all about Toad's adventures. So Toad spent a very pleasant afternoon boasting about all he'd done since he'd last seen Mole. The Return of the Hero, Chapter 11. When it began to get dark, the 4 friends all met in the parlor. Finally, they were ready to go, and Badger said, "Follow me. Mole first, because I'm very pleased with him. Rat next, Toad last. And listen, Toady, don't chatter too much or I'll send you back." Toad didn't want to be left out, so he stayed quiet. Badger led them along the river, then suddenly swung himself over the edge of the bank into a hole in the river bank. Mole and Rat followed silently, swinging themselves into the hole. But when it was Toad's turn, of course he slipped and fell into the water with a loud splash and a squeal. His friends hauled him out, but Badger was angry and told him that the next time he made a fool of himself he would definitely be left behind. They were finally in the secret passage, and the expedition had really begun. It was cold and dark and damp and narrow, and poor Toad began to shiver, partly from fear and partly because he was so wet. But he did his best to keep up on the long trip through the tunnel, and finally Badger said, "We should be under the dining hall by now." Then they heard over their heads the sound of people shouting and cheering and stamping on the floor and hammering on tables. Toad was frightened, but Badger just said, "They certainly are having fun, those weasels." They went on until the noise seemed even closer. "Hooray, hooray," they heard, and the stamping of little feet on the floor and the clinking of glasses as little fists pounded on the table. "What a time they're having," said Badger. "Come on." They hurried along the passage until it ended, and they found themselves standing under the trap door that led up into the pantry. Badger said, "Now, boys, all together." The four of them put their shoulders to the trap door and heaved it back. They hoisted one another into the pantry. Now there was only a door between them and the dining hall. Then they heard a weasel making a funny speech. "I would like to say one word about our kind host, Mr. Toad. We all know Toad. Good Toad, modest Toad, honest Toad." The rest of the weasels were laughing and laughing. "Let me at him," muttered Toad, grinding his teeth. "Hold on a minute," said Badger. "Get ready, all of you." "Let me sing you a little song," went on the weasel, "all about Toad." And he began to sing a mean song. Badger took a firm grip on the stick he carried, looked around at the others, and cried, "The time has come. Follow me." He threw the door open wide. What a squealing and a squeaking and a screeching filled the air. The terrified weasels dove under the tables and jumped out the windows. The ferrets ran for the fireplace and got jammed in the chimney. Tables and chairs were knocked over, and glass and china crashed on the floor. It was no wonder, for the four friends were a frightening sight. Mighty Badger, his whiskers bristling, his great stick whistling through the air. Mole, black and serious, holding up his stick and shouting his war cry, "A mole! A mole!" Rat, ready for a fight. Toad, swollen to twice his ordinary size, leaping into the air with Toad whoops. The whole thing ended quickly. Up and down the whole length of the hall walked the four friends, yelling and shouting and whacking with their sticks, and in 5 minutes the room was cleared, except for a few weasels they kept for prisoners. Badger told Mole to go check on the guards. Mole jumped out a window, and Badger told the other two to set a table and find some food. "We need dinner," he said. "Come on, Toad. We've got your house back for you, and you don't even offer us a sandwich." Toad wished Badger had noticed what a brave fighter he had been, but he didn't say anything. He just looked around and found some good food that hadn't been ruined in the fight. Just as they were sitting down to eat, Mole came back. "It's all over," he reported. "From what I can tell, when the stoats heard the noise from the hall, they ran away." "Excellent animals," said Badger. "Now there's just one more thing I want you to do, Mole. I want you to take those fellows on the floor there upstairs with you and have some bedrooms cleaned out and made really comfortable, clean sheets and all. Then you can come have supper. I'm very pleased with you, Mole." Mole picked up a stick, lined up his prisoners, and marched them upstairs. After a while he came back and said that every room was ready. Then he pulled his chair up to the table to eat. Toad put all his jealousy behind him and said, "Thank you, dear Mole, for all your trouble tonight, and especially for your cleverness this morning." They finished their supper happily and went to bed to rest on clean sheets, glad to have one back, Toad Hall. At breakfast the next morning, Badger told Toad that he really should have a dinner party to celebrate getting his house back. In fact, Badger told Toad he should write out the invitations that very day. Now sit down at that table. Write invitations to all our friends, and if you stick with it, we'll get them out before lunchtime. I'll help out by ordering all the food for the party." "What?" cried Toad. "Stay indoors and write a lot of stupid letters on a morning like this? I want to go around my property and make sure everything's all right, and swagger about and enjoy myself. No, thank you. Wait a minute. Why, of course, dear Badger, it shall be done. I'll give up this morning in honor of our friendship." Badger looked at Toad very suspiciously, but Toad just smiled. And as soon as Badger left the room, Toad hurried to the table. He had thought of a wonderful idea while he was talking. He would write the invitations, and he would make sure to mention his leading part in the fight. And he would hint at his adventures, and on the inside of each invitation he would list a sort of a program of entertainment for the evening, something like this: Speech by Toad. There will be other speeches by Toad during the evening. Lecture by Toad. Contents: Our prison system, the waterways of Old England, horse dealing, back to the land, a typical English squire. Song by Toad, composed by Toad himself. Other compositions by Toad will be sung in the course of the evening by the composer. The idea made him very happy, and he worked very hard and got all the letters finished by noon. Just then a weasel showed up at the door, asking if there was anything he could do. Toad gave him the letters and told him to deliver them as fast as he could. When the other animals came back for lunch after a morning on the river, Mole looked at Toad, expecting him to be mad about having to work all morning. But instead, Toad was so happy that Mole began to suspect something was up. Rat and Badger did too. As soon as lunch was over, Toad said he was heading off to the garden. He planned to work on some ideas for his speeches, but Rat grabbed his arm. Toad tried to get away, but Badger grabbed his other arm, and he knew they'd caught him. The two animals took him into a small room, shut the door, and put him into a chair. Then they both stood in front of him, while Toad sat glaring back at them. "Now, Toad," said Rat, "it's about this dinner. I'm sorry to have to speak to you like this, but we want you to understand clearly, once and for all, that there are going to be no speeches and no songs. Try to understand that we're not arguing with you. We're just telling you." Toad saw that he was trapped. They knew him too well. His dream was over. "Couldn't I sing just one little song?" he begged. "No, not one little song," replied Rat firmly, even though he felt terrible when he saw how disappointed Toad was. "Toady, you know your songs are all boasting. It's for your own good. You know you have to turn over a new leaf sooner or later, and this seems like a perfect time to do it." Toad thought for a long time. Finally, he raised his head. "You have won, my friends," he said sadly. "It was a small thing that I asked, but you are right, and I am wrong. From now on, I will be a very different Toad. Oh, what a hard world." And wiping tears from his eyes, he left the room. "Badger," said Rat, "I feel terrible. What about you?" "Oh, I know," said Badger gloomily, "but it had to be done. Toad has to live here. Do you want him to be laughed at forever by the stoats and weasels?" "Of course not," said Rat. "And speaking of weasels, it's lucky we met that little weasel just as he was leaving with Toad's invitations. I read one or two, and they were just awful. I took them all, and Mole was writing some new ones." At last it was almost time for the dinner. Toad was in his bedroom, thinking. Soon he began to smile. Then he started giggling. Finally he got up, locked the door, pulled the curtains across the windows, took all the chairs in the room and put them in a circle, and stood in front of them. Then he bowed, coughed twice, and began to sing. He sang the most boastful song ever, all about his heroic homecoming. He sang loudly and happily, and when he was done, he sang it all over again. He gave a long, long sigh. Then he straightened his bow tie and went downstairs to greet his guests. All the animals cheered when he came in and crowded around to congratulate him, but Toad just smiled and said, "It was nothing. Badger was the mastermind. Mole and Rat did all the work. I just helped a little." The animals were surprised that Toad was not boasting. They gave him even more attention, and Toad discovered that he liked that. Badger had ordered all the best food, and the dinner was a great success. There was a lot of talking and laughter, but Toad was very quiet. Some of the younger animals tried to make him sing a song or make a speech, but he wouldn't. Toad had really changed. From then on, the 4 animals led a peaceful life. Toad sent a pretty gold necklace to the warden's daughter with a nice letter. He also thanked the train engineer and even sent some money to the barge woman to pay for her horse. Sometimes, on long summer evenings, the friends would take a walk together in the wild wood. It was a safe place for them now. The mother weasels would tell their young ones, "Look, baby, there goes the great Mr. Toad. And that's the gallant Rat, a wonderful fighter, walking with him. And here comes the famous Mr. Mole you've heard so much about." And when their children were having temper tantrums, their mothers would tell them that the terrible Badger would get them if they didn't behave. Of course, Badger loved children, so it wasn't quite true. But it always worked. The end. Well, that was an interesting little story, so I'm still curious how different or the same is this junior version to the original. Anyway, let me know if you know. Until the next one.